A doll that changed into a horrifying ghoulish nightmare, almost as if it actually aged. A teddy bear that sent a man to the hospital, a lifelike mannequin that may be more than just an eerily realistic sculpture. These are cursed dolls that even Ed and Lorraine Warren would have been terrified of. This first story was making its rounds on the internet for a while, the doll that aged. So it all started with a regular baby girl doll that a young girl played with every day, but as time passed and the girl grew up, she played with the doll less and less, until eventually it was tucked away in the attic and forgotten about for over a decade. Sounds like the beginning of like Toy Story, but this is kind of like the horror version. So fast forward to when the parents decide to clear out the attic, they're looking for the old doll, but when they finally find it, they're completely shocked and horrified to find that the doll, which had been left untouched for years, now looked like this. Just kind of different from how they remembered it. I mean, in what world would anyone ever purchase something as horrific looking as that for their young daughter? Unless, you know, you're me, because that's a reaction I would just love to see on Christmas morning. The once sweet baby doll now had this ghoulish, shriveled appearance. I mean, it looks worse than the Crypt Keeper. Horrified, the parents quickly got rid of the doll. They didn't burn it in a fire like you'd probably expect though. Instead, they took the time to actually sell this monstrosity. And managed to. Next we have Mourning Dolls, and that's not like early mourning, I mean the death kind of mourning. Mourning dolls were a thing in the Victorian era, and back in those days life was incredibly tough, especially with the rampant diseases that led to high mortality rates a lot of the time in younger people. To cope with the loss of young loved ones, some families created these unique dolls known as Victorian mourning dolls. These were actually made for the parents, keepsakes designed to honor and remember their deceased daughters or sons. They were usually made from materials like wax or porcelain and dressed in black clothing to symbolize mourning and death. And even more depressing, they were handcrafted to look just like the youngsters who just croaked, with great attention to detail, and they'd usually put them on display where they used to play. Good lord. I get the idea of creating this tangible thing that's meant to keep their spirit alive, I guess, but man, that is morbid. To say that some of these things must have been cursed would be an understatement. Oh, mannequins, don't they just make you want to leave the store immediately? A lot of the time they're just faceless figures now, but they used to be a lot creepier when they were made to look more like people, with like eyes and noses and lips. Well, no mannequin hits that unsettling uncanny valley thing more than La Pascualita, an eerie mannequin that's become a must-see attraction in Mexico. This mannequin is known for its very lifelike appearance, and some people believe it might be more than just a display piece. The story goes that La Pascualita was modeled after the daughter of the bridal shop's original owner. She tragically died on her wedding day after being bitten by a poisonous insect. Heartbroken, the mother commissioned the mannequin in her likeness as a way to remember her. But there's always been this rumor or urban legend that La Pascualita isn't a mannequin at all, but a preserved corpse. Some claim they've seen her move or even heard her whisper. Plus the thing is just so eerily lifelike, especially for a mannequin. I mean, just look at that hand. Ugh. This story went viral when a TikToker named Jessie V did a video on it, but the ordeal had actually been filmed for TV before that. So this is the story of Mr. Ted, a haunted teddy bear that sent a man to the hospital. Mr. Ted once belonged to a psychic medium named Debbie Davis who claimed that the bear had some unsettling vibes. According to her, Mr. Ted had been known to cause nausea in people and even make growling sounds. So, you know, what do you do with a growling bear that makes you vomit? Well, you take it to a haunted castle, of course, because why not? Bolsover Castle is famous for being one of the most haunted castles in England. A team of 3 volunteers then agreed to spend the night in the castle with Mr. Ted just to see if there was any truth to the story. They set up their experiment with Mr. Ted sitting on a chair next to them as they tried to get some sleep. Paranormal expert Joe Lockwood was on hand, observing from a nearby room. Well, around 3 a.m., the team lost connection with a camera, and during this weird period, one of the producers working on the TV experiment suddenly fell ill and had to go to the hospital. After this, the bear was buried in a secret location about 30 miles from its owner's home in Manchester. Fingers crossed it doesn't crawl out of its grave to growl and upset any other innocent stomachs ever again. Okiku is a haunted doll from Japan with a really tragic backstory. In 1918, a young man named Daikichi Suzuki bought a doll for his young sister, Okiku. She fell in love with it right away and took it everywhere she went. But sadly, Okiku caught the yellow fever and died just a year later, still clutching the doll in her arms. Her family built an altar for her and placed the doll there to honor her memory. But people started noticing that the doll's hair, which had been neatly styled, seemed to grow. They saw split ends and longer strands, and along with this, the family experienced odd happenings in their home. There'd be flickering lights, loud bangs, and whispers, especially around significant dates, like Okiku's birthday, or the anniversary of her death. In 1938, the family moved, but decided to leave the doll behind, feeling it belonged near their daughter's resting place. They gave it to a local temple where it remains to this day, and yes, the hair supposedly continues to grow. Looking at this puppet, would you ever think twice about sleeping in the same room with it? It looks pretty innocuous, right? Well, according to paranormal investigator Jane Harris from Stourbridge, West Midlands, that wouldn't be advised. She'd acquired the doll from a guy named John who claimed that the wooden puppet tried to choke him in the middle of the night. So Harris decided to keep a camera on the thing throughout the night to try and see if it got up to any mischief. Well, one night, it did. On camera, she captured the string with the cross attached, which operates the puppet, slowly moving upright on its own before falling back down in the case. Harris stated, "I've never had anything as exciting as this. I've caught pictures of mists, orbs, and shadows, but nothing as physical as this video evidence." The previous owner, John, had grown up with the puppet, which belonged to his father. He said he never liked it either, that it always gave him the creeps, and that whenever friends came to visit, they'd never want to get near it. And then, of course, there's the choking incident. After John's father had died, he was clearing out his belongings, but ended up keeping the puppet, which he left on the drawer by his bed. And that very night, the incident occurred. He said, quote, "I was wide awake in bed and thought I saw a shadow move from one side of the window to the other, and worried something was trying to scare us. Then, without warning, my throat suddenly went really tight. I've never had anyone's hands around my throat before, so it was really scary. I tried to wake my wife, but it took her ages to come around. When she did, I remember looking straight at the puppet sitting on the drawer near our bed and realizing it was him." We've all heard of Robert the Doll. Well, how about a spooky first-hand account? This story comes from Reddit user Sublime Sloth, who posted this story along with a photo. They wrote, "Long story short, friend's sister went to the Robert the Doll exhibit in Key West and didn't believe the curse. Apparently flicked it off and took a photo without asking permission. Started having terrible luck. Photos messed up, eerie feelings of being watched, etc. This photo was taken after a conversation talking about how she felt that Robert was following her and had something to do with her string of bad luck. Someone jokingly took the photo after invoking Robert's name to see what would happen. 100% real and not photoshopped. She immediately wrote a letter apologizing to the doll the next day. Nightmare fuel. Had this photo for years and show it every time the topic of ghosts comes up." I don't know, what do you guys think of this one? Let me know in the comments. Did you get super sick of the movie Frozen 11 years back? God, that was over a decade ago. Well, at least you didn't have to go through what this next family did. In 2013, the Bedonia family in Houston brought an Elsa doll from the movie Frozen for their young daughter. Now, at first, everything was normal. The doll sang and said cute phrases from the movie just like it was supposed to, but then things started getting weird. According to Emily Bedonia, the doll started doing stuff like switching between English and Spanish, and for the next 6 years, the doll never once needed new batteries. Not that it even needed batteries at all, because apparently it would even say things when it was supposed to be off. So naturally, the family decided they'd had enough of Elsa and her weird antics, so they decided to let it go. Good old 11-year-old joke. Anyway, they threw it in the trash, but none of this is the creepy part. A few weeks later, they found Elsa in their basement. They tried to get rid of it again, this time by putting it deep at the bottom of the trash bin right before the garbage was collected. Then they took a short trip out of town thinking the doll was finally gone, but when they got back, Elsa was sitting in the backyard, like she'd never left. Now you'd think someone was just messing with them, but Emily pointed out that the doll had this distinctive mark from their daughter. The doll sitting in the backyard had that very same mark. This is Harold, full name Harold the Haunted Doll. and it's pretty easy to see why. I'd have some serious questions for whatever youngster would ever want to spend time playing with this thing. In 2003, a young man came across Harold at a flea market and felt this immediate urge to buy him for some reason. It was worn and shabby, but the man bargained with the seller and eventually paid $20 for it. But before he could leave, the old man selling the doll stopped him and insisted he hear the doll's eerie backstory. The man revealed that Harold was a gift he'd given to his own son, who tragically died shortly after receiving it. After his son's death, the old man kept Harold in his room, and that's when strange things began to happen. He would hear singing and laughter coming from the room when no one else was around. Frustrated and scared by the constant disturbances, the old man tried to burn the doll, but it wouldn't catch fire. The redditor decided to take the doll home anyway, and things got weird almost immediately. He started experiencing severe migraines, something he had never dealt with before. And a couple days later, his cat died. He began hearing the same voices and laughter that the old man had described as well. But even with all this happening, he decided to keep Harold, but he stuffed him in a suitcase, out of sight, out of mind. And I guess he couldn't burn it, he already knew, but I would have definitely not kept it in a suitcase. I would have driven it out of town and left it in the woods. The Swamp Dolls. It sounds like a great name for a band, but you know, that's not where I'm going with this thing. So in 2014, police in Alabama stumble on a very odd scene in Bear Creek Swamp. They find 21 dolls, most of them antique porcelain, all stuck on bamboo stakes and standing upright in the middle of the swamp. The dolls were discovered on land owned by a timber company, but when the police tried to reach out to the company to get some answers, they never got a response. The police also tried to track down who put the dolls there, but they came up empty-handed. Now, this wouldn't be all that eerie if Bear Creek Swamp didn't already have somewhat of a spooky reputation. People who visit the swamp have reported hearing disembodied voices, seeing strange orbs, and even spotted unidentified creatures. There's also an old legend that says the swamp is haunted by a grieving mother who's endlessly searching for her lost daughter. But believe in ghosts or not, it's hard to deny that finding a bunch of old dolls on stakes in a swamp is kind of unsettling. I do have to wonder what's going on in that town though, because I feel like if I was a cop and I was called to a scene where there were dolls on stakes, I'd be like, I think there's something else probably better I could be doing with my time. Maybe that's just me though. All that said, I've been your host James, and I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.